Hey everybody, it's me, Miss Alexis, and I have something very important to say. Happy Easter! Easter is one of my favorite days of the year because one, jelly beans! And most importantly, God pulled off the biggest miracle in history. He showed the world how to make peace. Peace is proving you care more about each other than winning an argument. On Easter, we celebrate how God made peace with us. They should call it Peaster, or maybe not. You're probably thinking, why would God need to make peace with me? I mean, we're not in an argument. Well, that's a long story. A really, really long story. To answer that, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. It's like this. People, you get it? People, peep, 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 peep. People were really close to God. And then something happened, something bad, and it separated God from the people. God's friendship with us was broken, and something had to be done. But don't worry, God had a plan, and you'll find out all about God's plan in today's story. It's the greatest story ever told. The story of Easter! God's plan. Okay, maybe just one more. I gotta save these for later. Maybe just one more. That one was popcorn flavored.
The Bible. It's 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry that fit together to form God's one big story. The epic adventure of how He created us and loves us so much that He made a way to rescue us. As we travel through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we discover people who met God and found their lives changed forever. Now, for an amazing story, inspired by the entire Bible.
In the beginning, God created a magnificent paradise, and everything in it was good. He created water and land and plants and trees and birds and fish and animals. And then, from the very dust of the earth, God created a man called Adam. He created a woman called Eve. They were the first two people on earth, made in God's image, living peacefully in paradise. Adam and Eve were friends with God. But then, they made a terrible choice. God had given Adam and Eve one rule.
You must not eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you do, you will certainly die.
But the temptation was too great for Adam and Eve. They broke God's rule, and what was once a paradise became a broken world. People started telling lies.
It was the woman you put here with me. She made me eat it.
Brother fought against brother.
No!
Selfishness spread through generations. When there had been peace in the garden, now there was pain and sin and death separating people from their Creator. But God had a plan to make peace once again with the people He loved so much. Hundreds of years after Adam and Eve broke His rule, God chose a man named Abraham and said,
All nations on earth will be blessed because of you. Look up at the sky. Count the stars if you can. That's how many children will be born into your family.
So Abraham had a son, Isaac, and Isaac grew up to have two sons of his own, Jacob and Esau. And those two sons had children of their own. Jacob, who God renamed Israel, he himself had 12 sons. So God had given Abraham a huge family just like He promised. But God's people, the Israelites, were still lost and broken, separated from Him. They still did not have peace. They didn't have peace when God rescued them from slavery in Egypt, when God led them through the Red Sea to escape their enemies.
Okay, great. But what are we supposed to eat out here in the desert? Sand?
The nation of Israel didn't have peace when God gave them a new law.
These commandments are hard. We want a king like all the other nations.
They didn't even get peace when God gave them a king.
The king's laws are no fair. We want a new God, like all the other nations.
Nope, nothing gave God's people lasting peace. They were still lost and broken and separated from God for thousands of years. But God had not forgotten the promise he made to Abraham.
All nations on earth will be blessed because of you.
God still had a plan to show the people just how much he cared for them. He knew this broken world would never be able to rescue itself, so God made a way. God sent his son, Jesus, to bring peace on earth once and for all. Jesus grew up and he taught people love and compassion, forgiveness and grace. He healed the sick and befriended the outcasts. He saw what was wrong and made it right. He loved the world and its people so deeply he gave his life on a cross to pay for the sins of the whole world.
Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing.
In Colossians, the Apostle Paul tells us God made peace through Christ's blood, through his death on the cross. When Jesus chose to give up his life, he paid the cost of every sin ever committed and every sin that had yet to be committed. People no longer had to be separated from God. But in the 3 dark days immediately following Jesus' death, his followers didn't understand all of that yet. They huddled in the dark, afraid that they too might be arrested or even killed.
Who's there?
Early on the morning of the 3rd day, Mary Magdalene arrived at the home where the disciples were staying.
They have taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they have put him.
The disciples stared at each other in shock. Then, Peter and John lunged for the door. They raced each other all the way back to the tomb where Jesus had been placed.
The tomb really is empty.
There are the linen cloths they wrapped him in.
Peter and John returned home, still uncertain and confused. And Mary Magdalene, who had followed them, stayed behind in the garden. And as she wept, she noticed a man standing nearby. And at first, she thought he was the gardener.
Sir, did you carry Jesus away? Tell me where you put him.
Mary.
The instant the man spoke, Mary Magdalene knew immediately who he was. It was Jesus, alive again.
Teacher!
Overjoyed, Mary returned to the disciples to share the incredible news.
I have seen the Lord.
It was true. Jesus had come back from the dead. He's more powerful than sin, more powerful than death. And through him, we can have peace with God and work toward peace with others as God intended from the very beginning.
So, it's like this. All throughout history, every moment of God's story led up to the life, death, and resurrection of God's Son, Jesus. Sin separated the people from God. That was a problem that we couldn't fix. So, God sent his Son, Jesus. And after Jesus' death, he beat sin, and after that, he beat death itself. So, I guess you could say Jesus was kind of like a bridge between the people and God. That made it possible for us to reconnect with God. The Apostle Paul once wrote, God was pleased to bring all things back to himself. God made peace through Christ's blood by his death on the cross. Because of Jesus, we can be close to God again. We're at peace. Jesus is alive, and he's made a bridge that will last forever. So, here's the one thing to remember today. God made peace with us. Remember that this Easter. And remember that every day. Really, think about what Jesus did for you and tell God how grateful you are. Don't just keep it to yourself either. Share the good news of God with others by telling them about Jesus, or by loving them like Jesus loves us. I'll see you guys next time. Happy Easter!